All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Water-efficient fixtures have been around for a long time. Do you remember when they first introduced the low-flow shower heads?
Jerry! Jerry! You too, huh?
Yeah.
These showers are horrible. There's no pressure. I can't get the shampoo out of my hair.
Me either.
If I don't have a good shower, I am not myself. I feel weak and ineffectual. I'm not Kramer.
You, what about me? I got the Tonight Show tonight. I'm going to have to shower in the dressing room.
Oh.
Where you going?
Well, I got to find another shower. They got you, too?
This is awful. I'm not Newman.
Hello, Newman.
Hello, Jerry. Well, I may have a solution to our little problem. Elaine, would you excuse us?
Oh, come on, Newman.
I have a private matter to discuss with my fellow tenants, if you don't mind.
Jerry.
Look, sister, go get yourself a cup of coffee, all right? Beat it. All right, now here's the lowdown. Through a certain connection, I've been able to locate some black market shower heads. They're all made in the former Yugoslavia. And from what I hear, the Serbs are fanatic about their showers.
Not from the footage I've seen.
Nevertheless, sometime this afternoon, behind the Market Diner, an unmarked van will be waiting. I'm expecting the call at any time. Are you in?
I'm down.
Jerry?
All right, I got everything here. I got the Cyclone F Series, Hyperjet Flow, Stockholm Superstream, you name it.
What do you recommend?
Now, what are you looking for?
Power, man. Power.
Like Silkwood.
That's for radiation.
That's right.
No, what is this? That's the Commando 450. I don't sell that one. What about this?
No, that's what we want. It's a Commando 450.
No, believe me. It's only used in the circus. It's for elephants.
Yeah, we'll pay anything. We've got to. What about Jack?
He couldn't handle that. He's delicate. Oh, yeah.
Well, made the point. Those low-flow nozzles have come a long way since then. When it comes to water conservation, nobody does it better than Orange County. In fact, even though the population continues to grow, we're using less water today than we were 10 years ago. And then during the drought, the orange was squeezed even more as mandates required us to go above and beyond an already stellar standard for efficient water use. But there was a cost. Unintended consequences, if you will, especially in places where systems of wastewater reuse have already been implemented. Dr. Kurt Schwabe is an adjunct fellow at the Public Policy Institute of California's Water Policy Center and professor of environmental economics and policy at the University of California, Riverside. He's published research and it focuses on the technical side of the effects of indoor conservation on systems like the Orange County groundwater replenishment system. And retired Army Lieutenant Colonel Marc Marcantonio will also weigh in on this discussion. This man has a breadth of experience so vast we couldn't fit it all in the program. Remember the show MASH? In the Army, he commanded mobile hospitals during disaster events. He also served as a nuclear, biological, and chemical warfare officer. After retiring from the Army, he worked as a fisheries biologist in the state of Washington before becoming GM of the Mutual Water District. He is now the general manager of the Yorba Water District and knows all too well about the economic impacts of conservation mandates after YLWD grappled with a 36% reduction during the drought. He lived to tell about it. First, we're going to hear from Dr. Kurt Schwabe. Please welcome him.
Thank you, Fritz, and good morning. I want to thank Director Thomas, Director Sheldon, the MODOC Board, as well as the Orange County Water District Board for inviting me and allowing me to be part of this really exciting and timely conversation. I also want to tip my hat to Tracy Muldoon and Damon Michelizzi, who have been doing an excellent job organizing this conference. In terms of managing MASH units, I manage little boo-boos on my daughter's arm, so I'm with a really amazing panel here. So if you look at my slide there and the quote by Frederick Bastiat, it's about accounting for the full range of impacts with decisions. And I think it unduly singles out economists. If you get through that whole quote, we can certainly talk about policymakers, perhaps, never general managers, though, of water districts. But it's this idea that good economics and good benefit cost analysis accounts for unintended consequences. And this is something that even to be more patriotic, Ben Franklin talked about around the same time in a letter he penned to a friend where he talked about prudential algebra, which was kind of the modern day benefit cost analysis. And these unintended consequences aren't one-time events. They're pervasive. And it's kind of the genesis of the field I'm in, environmental economics, where back in the 60s we realized that market transactions, while good for the market economy, often overlook unintended consequences and externalities. So we started to bring that into our models. And again, it's not one-time events. Every consumption and production activity creates an externality or some type of residual, which often leads to pollution. So it's around us, it's everywhere, it's pervasive. And you can even look into the movies and see either the benefits or costs of unintended consequences. So I thought of this idea. My kids recently saw The Princess Bride with me the other night, arguably one of the best movies ever. And I had nothing to do with it, but thank you. But it's interesting. You think about the unintended consequences of building up a tolerance to iocane powder, right? It allowed the man in black, or Wesley, to beat or best Vicini, the Sicilian, in a battle of the wits and save the princess, which is kind of fitting for where we're at right now. But anyways, more closer to home, we can think of unintended consequences with regards to water conservation. And a number of research projects have been looked at this in terms of low flush toilets lead to more flushing, low flow shower heads lead to longer showers, front load washers lead to more rinse cycles. My mom tells me so. I don't live with her. It's an issue these days, right? More and more kids are living with their moms and dads. Social norm messaging in terms of a positive unintended consequence actually leads to, in terms of for water, leads to a reduction in energy use, and not just associated with the technology, but also the idea we should conserve and looking for ways to conserve. And then finally, something called the Jevons paradox, is increases in irrigation efficiency often lead to more water use. So that kind of leads me to this question: are there unintended consequences from water conservation on recycling of wastewater? And this is really important because both conservation is kind of a demand-side management strategy to address drought and water scarcity, and water recycling is kind of a supply-side, augmented strategy. Do they work in concert together, or do sometimes is there friction between the two, and should we be aware of that friction? So here you see in California kind of the reduction in gallons per capita per day. It's produced water repopulation for different areas within California. And you notice that certainly during the state mandate, you see a significant reduction in water use because of the state mandate, the conservation. It's not just something that's happening in California. On the right graph, you see the red line shows kind of this trend over time of per capita water use nationwide. And at the same time, you see this trend in reusing wastewater over time as well. So we see these kind of conservation strategies and recycling strategies. What's the impact? So at this point, I would typically write some equations up on the board, use demand and supply curves, but I'll save you that agony. But I will go through a brief example here. Just so quickly, if we think of a water district with one person that consumes 100 gallons of water, 50% of it's indoor and 50% of it's outdoor. If they don't recycle, then you can think of their gallons per capita day being 100, as well as their import water being 100, or you can use source water if you don't want to talk about import. But if you recycle, and suppose that you recycle, you consume 20% of your indoor water use, and then 80% goes into recycling, then while your overall gallons per capita day is still 100, your gallons per capita day from your source water has dropped to 60 60 units. So that's a negative 40% reduction already in terms of your use of import or source water. Now suppose that there's a conservation mandate imposed on society, and both groups decide to engage in indoor water conservation and reduce their water conservation indoors by 20%. As you see in the no recycling situation, that led to a 10% reduction in imported water use, whereas when you engage in recycling, it only led to a 3% reduction in water use. So kind of what we see here is that recycled water decreases by 20% because of the indoor water conservation. It's likely going to lead to an increase in TDS and other constituents in our wastewater. And finally, it's relatively ineffective at reducing imports. So you could say then that when recycling is present, the degree to which conservation reduces imports or source water use depends on the relative fraction of indoor versus outdoor conservation. And therefore, if indoor conservation is adopted, then recycling may not be as drought-proof as people always claim it is. Okay. So what's the evidence suggest? So I'm going to present some anecdotal evidence and then a little bit more systematic evidence on this. So here we see some flows from Inland Empire Utilities Agency, their recycling plant, the regional recycling plant number 1. And on the left-hand axis is average inflows in million gallon days, and generally what you see is a decrease in that trend over time from 2011 to 2015. Obviously there's storms that happen, such as the winter big storm in August of 2014, which caused flows to go up, but generally there is this trend over time of less water going to our recycling plants. And then you also see the red dots, and that line there is the gallons per wastewater produced in terms of gallons per capita per day, and there's certainly a trend there. So we do see this trend in terms of flows going down over time, consistent with the trend we see in terms of water use. What about TDS concentrations? So my little theoretical model suggests it should be going up, and it is. So what we see here is, it's going up for 2 reasons. First of all, as the drought hits, your water supply often becomes a little more saline, and so your source water increases in salinity. But also, if people engage in indoor water conservation, then the wastewater becomes more concentrated. And I believe that's what's explaining these differences here over time from 2011 to 2015. Notice the red line is where your NPDES permit limit is. And so you've seen kind of 4 violations at this plant since 2011 in terms of exceeding that limit. And they are. We also look at how other constituents change from 2011 to 2015. I can talk about that in person with you later on if you want to. So that was anecdotal evidence. What about systematic evidence? So here's the idea is let's get a data on a bunch of wastewater treatment plants, their monthly flow rates, their monthly TDS qualities, and relate it to the state mandate and the voluntary mandate and the stress test after the state mandate was rescinded, and while controlling for other factors that would influence flow and TDS at the plant. And so what we do is we gather data from 32 wastewater treatment plants. Right now, we've got, at least today, I'll present this results over 48 months. We do what's called a fixed effects ordinary least squares regression analysis. And the results suggest that the mandate had a negative and statistically significant impact on influent flow, and had a positive and statistically significant impact on effluent TDS, similar to what kind of the theory was predicting and what we noticed anecdotally. Our next stage then is to relate it to effluent-dominated streams and see how quality, flow and quality are affected by changes at the wastewater treatment plant. You can imagine in some streams it will be, and others they aren't. So right now we just have, unfortunately, just 1 monitoring point and 52 observations. We certainly see some effects there, but I'm not ready to talk about it in any detail yet until we get more data. So what do you do in a situation like this? So if you think about it at the plant level, if your inflow is going down and your quality is going up, how do you respond to that? Well, I'm not sure how you actually respond to the flow going down, but we've developed a model here with David Jasby, who's a chemical and environmental engineer, and Quinn Tran we co-advised her, a PhD student. And we developed a plant level model where we looked at how you can do blending techniques to cost effectively address the salinity increase and other constituent increase in your wastewater. And you can actually blend it in such a way that it can be what we call purposed water. It can meet the type of demand that you want. Is it for golf courses? Is it for turf? Is it for orange groves, etc.? So we illustrate how you can do these blending techniques and identify cost-effective blending techniques there. But in terms of how you deal with the flow, You need a much broader model. So we've also developed what we call kind of an agency level or regional model. And right now, as kind of a representative agency, we've modeled the San Bernardino Valley Municipal Water District and the Bunker Hill Basin. And we look at natural recharge and stochastic recharges into the Bunker Hill over 50 years, et cetera. And we look at changes in demand, changes in prices, changes in recycling water demand. And we can answer a lot of interesting questions that get at this idea of understanding what the unintended consequences are. It's very complex. And without kind of a model like this, it's hard to understand how changes in, say, the price of agricultural wastewater affects the whole system in terms of recharge, in terms of the quality of water going to the stream, et cetera. So if I were to summarize then, I might say that recycling and conservation are integral parts of California's portfolio to address water scarcity and drought. The evidence does suggest that the conservation efforts in the drought and the state mandate impacted wastewater treatment effluent flow and quality. These unintended conservation efforts may increase wastewater treatment costs, reduce recycling opportunities, and impair surface water flows and qualities, especially in areas with effluent-dominated streams. And basically, it suggests there's an argument to be made that policymakers need to recognize the potential dependence of recycling on conservation, particularly when the conservation's indoors. Thank you.
Interesting, Kurt. Thank you. Thank you so much, Kurt. We're going to have questions for both of these gentlemen at the conclusion of Marc's speech. So please welcome Mr. Marcantonio.
Thank you. Okay, let's get this started. Do I need to do something to advance that first slide? Who's got the wand? I'm pressing the button. There we go. Well, good morning. I want to start out by differentiating between water conservation and water use efficiency. Conservation should be considered a short-term or emergency response to reduce water use, whereas it's very different from water use efficiency, which should be considered a long-term strategy to reduce water waste. And that's the key, I think, between the two. Little history about Yorba Linda. Yorba Linda Water District is now 109 years old and provides public water and wastewater service to basically 80,000 people in the cities of Yorba Linda, Placentia, Anaheim, Brea, and unincorporated Orange County. We were originally an agricultural community that has now transitioned into the sixth richest city of California with large residential lots, hobby farms, and horse and view properties. The community has a large amount of recreational properties, and our two largest customers are the city of Yorba Linda and the school district. Of significance is that we share a large border of our service area with the wildlands of Chino Hills State Park. More than 1,600 homes in our district border the state park. And I bring out these points to illustrate that Yorba Linda Water District has very high irrigation needs, especially since rainfall is extremely limited in our area. To summarize our infrastructure, we have 11 wells, 4 connections with Metropolitan for import water. We have 14 underground reservoirs totaling 54 million gallons and 12 booster pump stations for 20 different pressure zones due to the steep terrain in our area. On this service area map, you see all the different colors that represent different elevations throughout our system, and each one of those is a different pressure zone, which makes managing it somewhat unique, as you'll learn. At the heart of our distribution system, we are almost completed with the replacement and expansion of the 40-year-old Fairmont Booster Pump Station. With its additional pumping capabilities, Yorba Linda Water District will be somewhat unique in that we will be, for the first time, capable of pumping groundwater to 100% of our service area and also import water to 100% of our service area, giving us 2 completely redundant sources of supply should anyone be lost. Let's briefly review some key points of the most recent drought. When the governor asked for a voluntary 20% reduction in 2014, our customers exceeded that goal. When the emergency was declared in 2015, Yorba Linda Water District was required to reduce our consumption from 2013 levels by 36%, the highest in the state. While nobody thought we could do it, our customers complied and exceeded our 36% requirement. When reason prevailed and the stress test was implemented, Yorba Linda Water District was shown to be drought resilient, and our requirement was reduced to 0. Overall, it should be noted that through water use efficiency in the past 5 years, our typical maximum daily demands have reduced from 35 million gallon days down to now 20 million gallon days, despite more population and more water connections. The emergency drought declaration made us immediately realize many unintended consequences of water conservation. If you recall, in the emergency drought regulation, recirculating water fountains were allowed since they reuse the same water over and over again. Think of Yorba Linda Water District as a big recirculating water fountain. We don't have a purple pipe recycling system, but instead take recycling to a much higher level by reusing 100% of our wastewater, which is purified back to potable standards and returned to our aquifer for reuse. Our storm drainage system routes the runoff from directly to settling ponds, which recharge the basin, as does the water that our customers use for irrigation. The soils in our area are extremely well drained, which is why Orange County Water District locates their settling basins adjacent to us, and why our wells are located where they are. Virtually all of our water is reused locally, with the exception of that lost to evapotranspiration, which is reused through the hydrologic cycle. So I would contend that water is a local issue, unique to every area, so water conservation solutions should follow and also be local. Due to the recent emergency drought declaration, our mandated 36% water reduction did not prevent water waste in our district, nor did it provide a single glass of water to East Porterville. With the investments in water use efficiency our community has made, I worry much more about public health and public safety than I do our water supply. Regardless of conservation needs, all water districts must provide sufficient fire flow for domestic and commercial building fires. And in the case of urban areas adjacent to wildlands, we have the added challenge of dealing with wildland fires. Most probably don't realize that 60 to 70% of any district's cost are to support their fire flow requirements that are required by the authority having jurisdiction, whether it's the city, county, or whoever is your authority having jurisdiction. These photos are of the 2008 freeway complex fire in our service area. The speed of the fire was overwhelming and the intensity was devastating. Our average day of peak demand is, as I said, 20 million gallons a day, but during this fire it increased to 45 million gallon days. The red area in this picture shows you the perimeter of the freeway complex fire engulfing our district. And on this satellite photo, you can see the black burn scar, which is 30,305 acres, or 90% of the Chino Hills State Park. Yorba Linda Water District was ground zero, with 112 homes in Yorba Linda destroyed and 314 residences damaged or destroyed in the cities of Yorba Linda, Brea, and Anaheim. And many of you know this resulted in an inverse condemnation judgment of $69 million against Yorba Linda Water District for failure to protect, and continues to instill fear in our community, especially when water is restricted. We all know fear is a powerful motivator, which resulted in the public insisting that we invest in infrastructure that is oversized. This is our Highland Reservoir during construction and before being buried. It is 6 million gallons in size. Our Lakeview Reservoir is even larger at 8 million gallons. And after the freeway complex fire, The public insisted on building our Hidden Hills Reservoir, which should have been sized at about 500,000 gallons because it only serves 112 homes. But because of fear, it was oversized at 2 million gallons. This creates our second biggest concern, which is magnified during water conservation periods: public health problems, namely water quality. Water disinfection is one of the greatest public health achievements of all time, but has limitations that can be challenged by water conservation. With conservation, pathogens and unhealthy levels of chemicals may accumulate and be less diluted throughout the distribution system. Contaminants that water system operates include bacteria, viruses, cancer-causing disinfection byproducts, the process of nitrification, and chemical contaminants and metals. If water consumption decreases, flushing of the distribution system must be increased to maintain water quality. Water quality starts out from our sources as being excellent. The key to maintaining water quality in the distribution system is circulation and consumption. Long detention times in mains and reservoirs can lead to stagnation. Where distribution systems involve rugged terrain, including hills, ridges, and valleys, there are many places where water does not get circulated or consumed. One-way water mains, oversized reservoirs, oversized pipes, and pumps all contribute to water stagnation, especially during conservation and even with water use efficiency measures. Water quality depends on maintaining a good disinfectant residual to the extremities of your distribution system and to prevent nitrification and disinfection byproducts. The only way to ensure this is with flushing of all dead ends. Yorba Water District disinfects our groundwater with free chlorine, and our import water is disinfected with chloramine. With decreased water use, we carefully monitor the water quality in our reservoirs, especially to prevent nitrification in reservoirs filled with chloraminated water. The red dots overlaid on our service area map illustrate over 5,000 dead ends, most of which are fire hydrant spools and mains that are not looped due to terrain issues. All must be routinely flushed to maintain water quality. The less water consumed by customers, the more we must flush. So, financial. Public and private water districts provide service. Our expenses are directly related to the service of water treatment, storage, pumping, and delivery. Expenses include operations and the repair and replacement of infrastructure. As mentioned, we provide fire service, but few list the charge on customer water bills for fire flow service. Most customers simply do not realize that they pay for service. As an industry, we don't help things by charging customers as if we're selling them water as a commodity, like a retail store might sell products. As you know, water providers typically charge a base fee and a consumption charge. Because our customers historically used and reused a lot of water prior to the drought emergency, we recovered most of our costs with the consumption charge, thereby keeping the basic service charge artificially low. This financial model worked well for the district for over 100 years, but it failed when the state took the unprecedented action to mandate a 36% rationing of our water use or face fines up to $10,000 per day. The sudden loss of consumption revenue put Yorba Water District upside down on our bond debt covenant ratio, requiring a dramatic increase in the basic service charge. In our case, the unintended consequence was that water bills increased, especially for those with low water use, since water sales were reduced 36%. Another unintended consequence of conservation was the district lost revenue that was planned for water use efficiency projects. Our distribution system was designed and built over many years and optimized to provide high volumes of water for fire suppression. Water use efficiency is good, whereas water conservation can strand expensive infrastructure assets. Needless to say, water conservation produced the unintended consequence of damaging public trust. The newspapers in Northern California called Yorba profligate and touted our relatively high water use as being wasteful and entitled. but never once mentioned that we are the model agency for water reuse. Locally, we went through stages of public denial. A drought even existed. Then accusations of gouging, harassment, death threats to staff, humiliation on public talk shows. We were the recipients of a referendum movement and to overturn a valid Prop 218 rate increase that the customers approved. We were the recipients of a lawsuit and a recall election and even more. Because public water agencies are critical to life, public trust is imperative. Believe me, it's very easy to lose and very difficult to restore. So in conclusion, I would say all of us, we're victims of our own success. Our customers wake up every morning, flush their toilets, and the waste disappears magically. They turn the faucet handle and safe drinking water always comes out. This reliability of service has made inconsequential life's most critical elements. We need to make a paradigm shift and educate the public how difficult and expensive it is to provide safe and reliable drinking water. We need to tell our story. We need to promote our business as a service instead of a commodity. And confusing conservation with efficiency is like confusing motion with progress. As water providers, our primary mission is public safety and public health. We can't ignore this for the sake of conservation or efficiency. Thank you.
Thank you, Marc. So, Marc, about the responsibility of Yorba Linda for the freeway complex fire. First of all, how did they decide that you were responsible? And what about the other communities peripheral to the Chino Hills there? Why weren't they in the same situation you were?
I'm not an attorney, so the opinions I will give you on that are from my observations in education, and I wasn't even here during the freeway complex fire. I was up in Washington. But ultimately, if you boil it down to one thing, we were responsible to repay for a small group of homes because in that particular area, the fire hydrants lost water. In all the other areas of our district, even where all the other homes were lost, the system didn't fail. Water was still available in the fire hydrants. It was just overwhelmed the infrastructure's capability. We all build for fire flow, and in fact, that's why all of our water systems are as large as they are. It's not for drinking water, it's for our firefighting mission. But it's designed for domestic fires and commercial fires, not wildfires. Nobody's system can really handle that type of a fire. But because a small group of homes burned, because the fire hydrants ran out of water, because the fire burned the pump station down and shorted the pump, and the heat and deprived the air of oxygen, so the backup gas generator couldn't operate because of being starved for oxygen. Those hydrants didn't have water, and the court decided that since we're a public entity, we took the homeowners' use of those facilities away, and they need to be compensated for that. In the areas where the water continued to flow, we weren't found liable.
And you brought up an interesting conundrum down there. You said that you were able to make up this 36% mandate purely by the enthusiastic participation of the residents down there. However, there's this political overview and denial that the drought even existed. So it's pretty miraculous that you were able to get the participation in the program. You were even people who questioned it. Hey, so Kurt, you talk about the unintended consequences. So how do we split the public message of trying to get people to conserve, and particularly the one you focused on was indoor, the unintended consequences of indoor conservation? How do you get people to be thoughtful and proactive in their water consumption at home without having these unintended consequences? Where is the messaging going wrong so that we can not have the problems you were talking about?
That's a good question, and it troubles me to some extent that the message might be don't conserve, or there's not a good benefit of conserving or increasing water use efficiency and such. But I always like this quote, and maybe it's a little bit offhand, but it's the denial of complexity is the essence of tyranny. And these are complex systems. And I think the customers, if we give them time and explain it in clear terms, can understand that outdoor water use in more cases actually seems to save water significantly within a district, except for if you're in a situation like Marc, where the water leaches through the sandy soil and then you reuse it. And in that sense, there's a difference between, say, household efficiency and system efficiency. So, I mean, that's really the issue. There's a difference between household efficiency and system efficiency. So we have to do a better job in that sense of educating the public about these issues. And they will get it. I mean, I've been doing focus groups with households over the last year and a half, and we ask them, what can you do indoors to save water? And there's a whole litany of responses that they can do. We ask them, what can you do outdoors to save water? We can let our lawns die. Right? I mean, their understanding of all the different responses that they can do is really limited because it hasn't been indoctrinated into them. We haven't done a good enough job at kind of explaining how you can maybe change irrigation efficiency, change out different types of plants and water use, irrigate at different times of the season based on plant needs or times of the day in that sense.
And I bet you that people in their personal lives don't draw the distinction between inside water use and outside water use. And we could look at it different ways and how we approach the use in our family situations.
Yeah, I think it's incumbent upon the districts and to kind of promote that. But also, I mean, as economists, I certainly, and I understand water is both a public and a private commodity. And, as economists, I'd be remiss if I didn't say pricing matters as well. And when, how do you ration a good, really, when you get down to it? Should it be the state that comes in and decides how to ration it? Should it be the local agencies, which really know kind of the local characteristics, how to ration it within their district? And then, how do you use prices versus some of these other measures, and what's the effectiveness of these? So, again, it's somewhat complicated. We certainly have the intellectual capacity to deal with it, though.
Thank you so much, gents. I think we have time for one question from the audience. Anybody out there? Yes. Identify yourself.
Really? My name is Susan Lynn Longville. I'm the president of San Bernardino Valley Municipal Water District. I'm asking a question about fire and about the liability found against your district. In 2003, I sat on a city council when the fire came down, the old fire came down through the hills, windblown, took out 440 homes. We never thought to sue the water district for the fire hydrants because it was wind. And I'm trying to get a sense of, was there not, as I recall, your fire was wind-driven? That's what I'm asking about.
Really, the cause of the fire was a car that ran off the freeway, and its catalytic converter started the fire. So the car was the cause of the fire. The district didn't cause the fire. The difference was this was raised as an inverse condemnation suit. So it wasn't a simple liability lawsuit. It was presented as an inverse condemnation suit, which is really rare and haven't been done that much, although it's probably going to be a big problem in the future for us that attorneys are grappling with now. That was the reason why we were found liable, because they did it as an inverse condemnation suit.
Thank you for your question. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Really interesting. Give them a round of applause.